Hi guys, I am making a video today about how to set up a build pipeline for your Unity project. And there's lots of reasons you might want to build pipeline. You might have automated test coverage that you want to run and to make sure that you haven't got any regressions in your game or any bugs that you've already checked for. But for me, the real strength of a build pipeline is that you can actually build out all of the target platforms for your game every single time you make a change in your version control. And so I'm going to be using Gitlab CI for this today because I love GitLab and I use it for all of my projects. There'll be a link in the description to this page, and this is just a bunch of notes I've made which kind of takes you through the process that we're going to go through with this video today. We're going to start by setting up basically the Git project for your game, pushing code up to GitLab, configuring any of the secret variables that you need to know, like your Unity password and Unity username, so that it can sign in and build for your license, generating a license, either a Unity a free one or a pro one, depending on what you're using, and then how to integrate that license into your actual builds. So yeah, let's just jump right in and get started. So the first thing first is Unity and getting a game open. So I have downloaded this free tutorial asset bundle called Dragon Crashers. It's quite fun. It's basically just a simple combat between a couple of fighters and some skeletons and a dragon. It mostly plays itself. It's just kind of showing off what kind of things can happen in Unity. But this will work for most games. Well, the actual pipeline will work for any game that you're building in Unity. Some of the builds that I'm doing, for example, WebGL doesn't necessarily work for any game that you're building, but the general builds work as expected. So this game I've currently got in a folder on my desktop called Dragon CI. That's just what I've called it. You can obviously call it your own build, and these are just your Unity files. Now I'm going to navigate to that folder in my terminal. So I'm going to go into the Dragon CI folder, and you might use Git using UI. I like to use Git in the command line. How Git works is not part of this video today, but if you have a look at, first things first, let's create a new Git project. Okay, so by default you can see there's a lot of stuff here that we actually don't need. We don't need to commit and track all of the files that Unity builds in your local directory. First things first, there's a great website called gitignore.io where you can build yourself. Let's actually go gitignore.io, where you can get gitignore files for all sorts of projects, and it has one for Unity. So I'm going to generate that file and then download it. Okay, that's the file. It's given it the wrong name because I've used WebGL to download it. But if I now change the name to .gitignore, there, it's excluded any files from the Git tracking that we don't care about. So all we really care about is your assets, your packages, and your project settings. Before I move on, one quick note, I'm going to be showing off the WebGL builds. One thing you always need to worry about with your WebGL builds is, if I go into planar settings, the compression settings, because sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, so we've already got the compression fallback enabled. That's fine. By default, it often doesn't. So there's often quite a few different things that can go wrong with your WebGL builds, but you can now turn your compression off entirely, or you can enable the decompression fallback, and that should solve a bunch of the problems. We already have that, so we don't have to worry about that. So the next thing we're going to do is actually track our project in Git. So to do that, we're going to add all the files, which will take a couple of seconds because this project is rather large. I probably should have picked something a bit simpler to demo, but I wanted to show you that this actually just works for even complicated projects and not just jam games and simple things. So Now you can see all the files are in there. We are going to commit. Added game files. And we are not going to push at this point because there's still a few more things that we need. So I could just push this up to Unity. In fact, why not? I'm getting ahead of myself. We actually need to create a project that we're going to push to. So we are going to go and create a new project repository in GitLab, a blank project. I'm going to call this Dragon CI. It's going in my personal namespace. I'm going to make it a public repository. It could be private, that's up to you. Okay, and now that we've created the project, we can get our remote URL, which is this one here that we want. In fact, we can copy this whole line. So we want to do git remote add origin and then our remote. And that's basically telling Git this is where we want you to send all the files when we push them. And next we're going to push, telling it to push all of our files up to the master branch. Okay, that's going to take a little while because it's quite a big project. So we'll just leave that to go in the background a bit. Right, the next thing we are going to do is we are going to add our CI, which is our continuous integration files. Now, first off, I wanted to show you this site called Game.ci. This is a fantastic community of people who've built all the tools that we're using today. And they've got great documentation for GitLab. You don't even need this video. You can just read through this in your own time and figure out how all of it works. But the crux of everything is going to come from this project here, which is the Unity 3D Gitlab CI example project by a guy called Gabriel Brenton. And he's built a project. This is actually a fully running game with all the CI components. In fact, is there an easy way to find the link from here? I'm pretty sure if I went to gabrielbrenton.gitlab.io / this page. Yeah, so part of the CI pipeline is building and deploying the game to the Gitlab Pages feature. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing with our build today as well. And his project has a fully functioning game built in. It's even got sound. Just going to turn that up a bit. There you go. Which in itself is quite fun. You should definitely check this out and have a play of this because it is quite fun. But that's not what we're doing right now. So he's built this project and it's a great template to work off of. So I'm actually going to grab this in another terminal window. I'm going to git clone this project because there are a few files that we're going to have to copy from this project into our project. Okay. Now, if we minimize all of our windows and look at the desktop, here's the game that we just downloaded. Again, just like our project, it's got assets, packages, and project settings. It's also got this CI folder. Now, what we're going to do, I could be doing this all terminal as well, but I'll do some non-terminal stuff as well for all you UI people. So on the left-hand side is our project, on the right-hand side is the template. So we're going to copy the CI folder because we want that. And also inside assets, scripts, editor, there's a very important build command, this file right here. So that's another file that we want. So similarly, we're going to go into assets, scripts, editor, and we're going to copy this file across. And I think that's all that we need for our settings. We don't need the rest of these. Then the next thing is we need to copy some more stuff across, but this can't really be done throughout the UI. So we're going to copy unity3d.gitlab.ci.yaml. We're going to copy that into our Dragon CI folder. Dragon CI.gitlab.ci.yaml. And this file has all of the information that GitLab needs to build your game. So we're going to go through and make some changes to this. We're going to call the game Dragon CI. We need to put the right Unity version in. So to do that, we're going to open up Unity, but we can have a look here in help about Unity, and it tells me that I'm on 2020.3.6F1. So I'm going to go into here, 2020.3.6F1. That's my version. Very important to get that right, because if you are working in the editor in a different version to what you're building, that's going to not quite work. Other than that, the image version is 12. I think that's right. I think we can leave most of the settings as they are. Okay, and then we can scroll down through the rest of this file. And this file is going to show you all the different kinds of things that we can build in GitLab. So at the top, it's just doing some setup. It's basically saying which Docker image it's going to use. It's creating a few builds for licensing and caching. There's this get activation file, which we'll look at later. It runs test coverage, so tests for unit tests and for play mode tests. Then we come to our first commented section. So these are, when things are commented out, that means they're not going to be run. The next thing is, right, so when things are commented out, that means they are not going to be run in the build pipeline. So things that aren't being run at the moment are JUnit tests and the play mode and edit mode tests with JUnit. And that's because JUnit needs some additional setup. We don't want to deal with that. We aren't even really that concerned about the play mode and edit mode tests, but they're good to have in case you decide you want to add test coverage to your game. And then we get to the build stage. Now we have separate builds here for standalone Linux, standalone Linux with IL2CPP, standalone OS X, Windows, WebGL, Android, and Xcode. And so that covers most of the major target builds that we care about. So right from the get-go, I'm going to get rid of iOS because I haven't got a Mac and I can't build iOS code, so I can't set up the licensing for that. I am going to leave Android, but I'm going to do the standard Android and not the IL2CPP. We're going to leave WebGL, we're going to leave Windows, OS X, and standard Linux, but not the IL2CPP. And that's all the changes I'm going to make. I might go into more details about what the different builds are and how you can use them in a future video. I've personally been playing around with deploying the Android version to the App Store, which has been going quite well, but that's beyond the scope of an introductory video. Right, so that's enough for the changes here. I'm just going to save that, close that file. I think I've done everything that I needed to. I'm just going to check my notes to make sure. If I even still have my notes. Okay, setting up Git. So we've copied Gitlab CI, the CI, the build script. We've updated our CI YAML. And now, since we've made changes, so these are all the files we've just added. We've added the CI folder, we've added the build command in the editor folder, and we've added our CI YAML. So again, we're going to add those files, going to commit, added CI files, and we're going to do a push. Okay, so looking at our Dragon CI project, we are now going to look at CI/CD, which is our continuous integration, continuous deployment. And we can see here on the master branch, we've just got a build for added CI files. Now that is the second commit that we pushed. We pushed our game files and our CI files. It did nothing when we pushed our game files, but now that we've added our gitlab ci.yaml file, it knows it needs to do CI builds, and so it's trying to build one. Now this particular build has been blocked. And the reason it's been blocked is because we need to do some configuring inside our project settings so that it can actually start building things. So the first thing we're going to do is go into settings and CI/CD. Now, we need to add some variables. And the purpose of variables is the builds need to know information that we want to keep hidden and secret. So we don't want to commit passwords and things like that into our Git project directly, because people might find them and we don't want them to, and it's not particularly secure. So it's good to use variables. And what happens is when the CI pipeline builds, it will inject these variables into the pipeline and have access to the information in a secure way. And so the first things we need to add, let me just open my notes in a different tab, is we need to add our Unity username and our Unity password. And this is so that the builds can log into Unity on our account, and so Unity can know, okay, so this is a registered person making a build, that's fine. There. Now, if you look at the variables, I've got one for my username and one for my password, which means when the CI pipeline is running, it will now have access to those variables. So we're going to go back to our CI pipeline. Okay, and we're going to extract our zip file. And here we have our ALF file. So next thing, we're going to click on this link and go into the Unity license activation side of things. So what we want to do is we want to browse and upload our file. We are using Unity Personal Edition. My organization, unfortunately, is going to make less than 100,000 in gross revenue. And we can now download our license file, which is excellent. Now, the license file needs to be uploaded into Gitlab. And so then Gitlab will have a license to use when it builds your projects. Again, we're going to stick this in the CI settings, because again, this is the sort of thing you don't want to share with people. So we are going to use the Unity license key. And I've copied it into the variable from the file off screen, so as to not show my license on screen. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to rerun the build that we just did. Now, it's very straightforward. We can either push another commit to the repository, or we can just manually trigger a build. So we want to build the master branch, and we want to run that. Now you can see, whereas before it said the activation build, now, because it has recognized that we have our license file added, we've got all of the different builds running here. So in the build and test section, we have our edit mode and play mode tests, which of course we haven't got any in the project, but if we had some tests, this would test our game. We have an Android build, a WebGL build, and standalone builds for Windows, OS X, and Linux, just like we configured earlier. Now, these take varying amounts of time. So I found that the standalone builds take about 10 minutes. The WebGL build can take 20. The Android one is also quite slow. Can take 20 to half an hour, depending on how quickly the server is running at the time. So I'm going to skip ahead to when these are built. But then also what we have is we have a pages deploy step. And what this will do is once the WebGL build is complete, it will then deploy that build to the Gitlab Pages service, which means that actually every time we make changes to our game and push them, we can play them in the browser and check them that everything is working as expected. And you can send this to playtesters or people who have an interest in the game. You can always have with you on your phone. You can always have access to the latest version. And also, because these get stored for quite a while in Git, you can actually have access to every change of your game that you make. Great, and now that all of the builds have run, we can actually start taking a look at what we've built here. So the first thing I want to look at is the pages deployment. So if you look at the URL for our project, my username, or the project namespace, the group name is YanniBoy, that's my personal account, but this could also be a group if you like to group projects together. So it's YanniBoy, and there's Dragon CI. And then the naming structure for your pages URL is your group namespace. So yanniboy.gitlab.io / and then your project name. So Dragon CI. So I can tap to play, and the game plays, as you would expect in a WebGL build. The other thing I can show is obviously you can download your WebGL build. So whenever you want to download a build that you've made, you go to the job artifacts and you hit download, and that saves it. And seeing as I'm running a Linux, I will have a look at the Linux build. I'm going to open it with the archive manager. And here we've got builds. And the game runs as a desktop application. And the last thing I wanted to show was the Android build, which also runs. And to do that, I'm going to show that off on my phone. So as you can see, I'm on my mobile phone, an Android phone. I'm looking at our project page. I'm going to go to our CI pipeline. And you can see this is our build for adding CI files. I'm going to open the pipeline and I'm going to scroll to our Android build. Now you can see here on the right side we've got our job artifacts, and I'm going to actually, rather than downloading the zip file, I'm going to just go to Browse, Builds, Android, and we've got our APK file, which will take a second, and then I'm going to open it. Now, on your phone, you might need to enable installing third-party applications. I'm not going to go into that now, but obviously this app isn't on the Play Store and therefore isn't verified by Google. I'm going to install it anyway, and I'm going to open it. And it's running just like we expected it to. Cool, and there you have it. I hope you found that interesting, and if you have any questions, please do feel free to comment. I'm going to do a few more videos when I find time to do them, but if there's anything you're interested to hear about, some of the topics I'm thinking of exploring are automatically building to itch.io and a few other ideas I've got, like Google Play Store, Steam, the usual suspects. So yeah, see you in the next video.